All right, everybody, welcome back to the Anna Karenina series. Today we are doing chapters 14 and 15 of part 1. I don't know exactly how many parts are in this book. Let's find out. Let's just scroll through real quick. 16, 17, 18, 19. Oh my gosh, there are like 80 chapters in this one part. Oh no, okay. Two, one. I'm going backwards. Part 2. Okay, so there are 34 chapters in part 1 of this book. And right now we're on chapter 14. There we go. Alright. Alright, I'm getting back to where we were in part 1. There are 34 chapters, so we got 20 more chapters to go. We're almost halfway there. Where is it? There it is. Alright. Alright, wonderful. So, Levin just proposed to Kitty, and Kitty said no. And we are jumping in right after that. But at that very moment, the princess came in. There was a look of horror on her face when she saw them alone and their disturbed faces. Levin bowed to her and said nothing. Kitty did not speak nor lift her eyes. Thank God she has refused him, thought her mother. And her face lighted up with the habitual smile which she greeted her guests on Thursdays. She sat down and began questioning Levin about his life in the country. He sat down again, waited for other visitors to arrive in order to retreat unnoticed. 5 minutes later, there came in a friend of Kitty's, married the preceding winter, Countess Nordston. She was a thin, sallow, sickly, and nervous woman with brilliant black eyes. She was fond of Kitty, and her affection for her showed itself as the affection of married women for girls always does, and the desire to make a match for Kitty after her own ideal of married happiness. She wanted her to marry Vronsky. Levin she had often met at the Strabatskys early in the winter, and she had always disliked him. Her invariable and favorite pursuit when they met consisted of making fun of him. I do like it when he looks down at me from the height of his grandeur, or breaks off his learned conversation with me because I'm a fool, or is condescending to me. I like that so. To see him condescending, I'm so glad he can't bear me, she used to say of him. She was right, for Levin actually could not bear her, and despised her for what she was proud of and regarded as a fine characteristic, her nervousness, her delicate contempt and indifference for everything coarse and earthly. The Countess Nordston and Levin got into that relation with one another not seldom seen in society, where two persons who remain externally on friendly terms despise each other to such a degree that they cannot even take each other seriously and cannot even be offended by each other. The Countess Nordston pounced on Levin at once. Ah, Konstantin Dmitrievich! There's again, that's the name switch up. Gotta love it. So you've come back to our corrupt Babylon, she said, giving him her tiny yellow hand and recalling that he had chanced to say early in the winter that Moscow was a Babylon. Come, is Babylon reformed or have you degenerated? She added, glancing with a simper at Kitty. It's very flattering for me, Countess, that you remember my words so well, responded Levin, who had succeeded in recovering his composure, and at once, from habit, dropped into his tone of joking hostility to the Countess Nordston. They must certainly make a great impression on you. Oh, I should think so. I always note them all down. Well, Kitty, have you been skating again? And she began talking to Kitty. Awkward as it was for Levin to withdraw now, it would still have been easier for him to perpetrate this awkwardness than to remain all the evening and see Kitty, who glanced at him now and then and avoided his eyes. He was on the point of getting up when the princess noticed that he was silent, addressed him. Shall you be long in Moscow? You're busy with the district council, though, aren't you? And can't be away for long. No, princess, I am no longer a member of the council, he said. I have come up for a few days. There's something the matter with him, thought Countess Nordston, glancing at his stern, serious face. He isn't in his old argumentative mood, but I'll draw him out. I do love making a fool of him before Kitty, and I'll do it. Konstantin Dmitrievich, she said to him, do explain to me, please, what's the meaning of it. You know all about such things. At home in our village of Kaluga, all the peasants and all of the women have drunk up all they possessed, and now they can't pay us any rent. What's the meaning of that? You always praise the peasants so. At that instant, another lady came in the room, and Levin got up. "Excuse me, Countess, but I really know nothing about it, and I can't tell you anything," he said, and looked around at the officer who'd come in behind the lady. That must be Vronsky, thought Levin, and to be sure of it, glanced at Kitty. She had already had time to look at Vronsky and look around at Levin, and simply from that look in her eyes, that grew unconscionably brighter. Levin knew she loved that man, knew it surely as if she had told him so in words. But what sort of man was he? Now, whether for good or for ill, Levin could not choose but remain. He must find out what kind of man was like whom she loved. There are people who, on meeting a successful rival, no matter what, are at once disposed to turn their backs on everything good in him and to see only what is bad. There are people, on the other hand, who desire above all to find in that lucky rival the qualities by which he has outstripped them, to seek with a throbbing ache at heart only what is good. Levin belonged to the second class, but he had no difficulty in finding what was good and attractive in Vronsky. It was apparent at the first glance. Vronsky was a squarely built, dark man, not very tall, and with a good-humored, handsome, and exceedingly calm, resolute face. Everything about his face and figure, from his short-cropped back hair to his freshly shaven chin, down to his loosely fitting, brand-new uniform, was simple and at the same time elegant. Making way for the lady who had come in, Vronsky went up to the princess and then to Kitty. As he approached her, his beautiful eyes shone with a specially tender light and with a faint, happy, and modestly triumphant smile. And so it seemed to Levin, bowing carefully and respectfully over her, he held out his small, broad hand to her. Greeting and saying his small... Okay, I thought this was her to him. I misread that. Well, I read it correctly, but I misunderstood what it said. Greeting and saying a few words to everyone, he sat down without once glancing at Levin, who had never taken his eyes off him. "Let me introduce you," said the princess, indicating Levin. "Konstantin Dmitrievich Levin, Count Alexei Kirillovich Vronsky." Vronsky got up and, looking cordially at Levin, shook hands with him. "I believe I was to have dined with you this winter," he said, smiling, his simple and open smile, "but you had unexpectedly left for the country. Konstantin Dmitrievich despises and hates town and us townspeople," said Countess Nordston. "My words must make a deep impression on you, since you remember them so well," said Levin, and suddenly conscious that he had said just the same thing before, he reddened. Vronsky looked at Levin and Countess Nordston and smiled. "Are you always in the country?" he inquired. "I should think it must be dull in the winter." "It's not dull if one has work to do. Besides, one's not dull by oneself," Levin replied abruptly. "I'm fond of the country," said Vronsky, noticing and affecting not to notice Levin's tone. "But I hope, Count, that you would not consent to live in the country always," said Countess Nordston. "I don't know. I have never tried for long. I experienced a queer feeling once," he went on. "I've never longed for the country. Russian country, which with bast shoes and peasants, as when I was spending a winter with my mother in Nice. Nice itself is dull enough, you know, and indeed Naples and Sorrento are only pleasant for a short time, and it's just there that Russia comes back to me most vividly, and especially the country. It's as though," he talked on, addressing both Kitty and Levin, turning his serene, friendly eyes from one to the other, and saying obviously just what came to his head. Noticing the Countess Nordston wanted to say something, he stopped short without finishing what he had begun, and listening attentively to her. The conversation did not flag for an instant, so that the princess, who had always kept in reserve in case of subject should be lacking, two heavy guns, the relative advantage of classical and the modern education, and universal military service, and not to move out either of them, while Countess Nordston had not a chance of chaffing Levin. Levin wanted to, and could not, take part in the general conversation, saying to himself every instant, "Now go." He still did not go, as though waiting for something. The conversation fell upon the table, turning in spirits. The conversation fell upon table turning in spirits, and Countess Nordston, who believed in spiritualism, began to describe the marvels she had seen. "Ah, Countess, you really must take me for pity's sake to take me to see them. I have never seen anything extraordinary, though I am always on the lookout for it everywhere," said Vronsky, smiling. "Very well, next Saturday," answered Countess Nordston. "But you, Konstantin Dmitrievich, do you believe in it?" she asked Levin. "Why do you ask me? You know what I shall say. But I want to hear your opinion." "My opinion," answered Levin, is only that the table turning simply proves that educated society, so called, is no higher than the peasants. They believe in the evil eye and in witchcraft and omens, while we. Oh, then you don't believe in it? I can't believe in it, Countess. But if I've myself seen it? The peasant women, too, tell us that they have seen goblins. Do you think I tell a lie? And she laughed a mirthless laugh. Oh, no, Masha. Konstantin Dmitrievitch said he could not believe in it, said Kitty, blushing for Levin. And Levin saw this, and still more exasperated would have answered. But Vronsky, with his bright, frank smile, rushed to the support of the conversation, which was threatening to become disagreeable. You do not admit the conceivability at all, he queried. But why not? We admit the existence of electricity, of which we know nothing. Why should there not be some new force still unknown to us, which, when electricity was discovered, Levin interrupted hurriedly, it was only the phenomenon that was discovered, and it was unknown from which it proceeded and what were its effects. And ages passed before its application were conceived, but the spiritualists have begun with tables writing for them and spirits appearing to them, and have only later started to say anything that it is an unknown force. Vronsky listened attentively to Levin. What was that? Interesting. Okay. Vronsky listened attentively to Levin, as he had always did listen, obviously interested in his words. Yes, but the spiritualists say we don't know at present what this force is, but there is a force, and that these are conditions in which it acts. Let the scientific men find out what the force consists in. No, I don't see why there should be any new force of it. Any new force. If it... Why? Because with electricity, Levin interrupted again. Every time you rub tar against wool, a recognized phenomenon is manifested, but in this case, it does not happen every time, so it follows that it is not a natural phenomenon. Feeling probably that the conversation was taking a tone too serious for a drawing room, Vronsky made no rejoinder, but by the way of trying to change the conversation, he smiled brightly and turned to the ladies. Do not let us try at once, Countess, he said, but Levin would finish saying what he thought. I think, he went on, that this attempt of the spiritualists to explain their marvels as some sort of new natural force is most futile. They boldly talk of spiritual force and then try to subject it to material experiment. Everyone was waiting for him to finish, and he felt it. And I think that you would be at a first-rate medium, said Countess Nordstrom. There's something enthusiastic in you. Levin opened his mouth, was about to say something, reddened, and said nothing. Do let us try table turning at once, please, said Vronsky. Princess, will you allow it? And Vronsky stood up for a little table. Kitty got up to fetch a table, and as she passed, her eyes met Levin's. She felt for him with her whole heart, the more because she was pitying him for suffering of which she herself was the cause. If you can forgive me, said her eyes. I am so happy. I hate them all, and you and myself, his eyes responded, and he took up his hat. But he was not destined to escape. Just as they were arranging themselves around the table, and Levin was on the point of retiring, the old prince came in, and after greeting the ladies, addressed Levin. Ah, he began joyously. Been here long, my boy? I didn't even know you were in town. Very glad to see you. The old prince embraced Levin, and talking to him did not observe Vronsky, who had risen, and was serenely waiting till the prince should return to him. Kitty felt how distasteful her father's warmth was to Levin after what had happened. She saw, too, how coldly her father responded at last to Vronsky's bow, and how Vronsky looked with amiable perplexity at her father, as though trying to and failing to understand how and why anyone could be hostilely disposed toward him, and she flushed. Prince, let us have Konstantin Dmitrievitch, said Countess Nordstrom. We want to try an experiment. What experiment? Table turning? Well, you must excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, but to my mind it is better fun to play the ring game, said the old prince, looking at Vronsky and guessing that it had been his suggestion. There's some sense in that anyway. Vronsky looked wonderingly at the prince with his resolute eyes, and with a faint smile began immediately talking to Countess Nordstrom of the great ball that was to come off next week. I hope you will be there, he said to Kitty, as soon as the old prince turned away from him. Levin went out unnoticed, and the last impression he carried away with him of that evening was the smiling, happy face of Kitty answering Vronsky's inquiry about the ball. All right, I think we are just going to do chapter 14 for right now. My throat is very dry. I've been recording all day, so I think we're going to call it there. Sucks to be Levin, but I guess we'll figure out exactly how the story plays out. Thank you very much. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and let me know what you think about this whole story in the comments. Thank you.